3:47 a.m. The Kenwood neighborhood was silent. Snow blanketed the mansions. Million-dollar homes lined the tree-lined streets of one of Minneapolis's wealthiest enclaves. Street lamps cast amber light on pristine driveways. Nothing suggested danger. Everything was still. Then the silence shattered. Over 180 federal agents descended on the estate at 2247 Humboldt Avenue South. FBI tactical units, ICE Homeland Security investigations, DEA task force members, U.S. Marshals, Minneapolis SWAT. They breached the front gate with a battering ram. Flashbangs exploded through windows. K-9 units swarmed the perimeter. Armored vehicles blocked every exit. The raid was synchronized across 7 locations simultaneously. What federal agents found inside would expose the largest human trafficking and narcotics distribution network ever uncovered in Minnesota's history. 2.64 tons of narcotics seized, $47.2 million in cash and assets recovered, 100 arrests across 3 states, 89 victims rescued from conditions federal prosecutors would later describe as slavery. If you're still watching, tap like now. What they found beneath this mansion will change how you see corruption in America. The estate belonged to Hassan Mohammed Nur, 51, and his brother Abdurrahman Mohammed Nur, 48. Both were immigration attorneys. Hassan ran a storefront law practice in Minneapolis's Cedar Riverside neighborhood. Abdurrahman operated a consulting firm specializing in asylum cases and refugee resettlement. They were community leaders, donors to local campaigns, advocates for immigrant rights. But according to federal prosecutors, they were something else entirely. The investigation began 14 months earlier. A single wire transfer flagged by Treasury Department analysts. $240,000 sent from a Minneapolis business account to a shell company in Dubai. The routing was strange. The business entity didn't match the transaction pattern. Treasury forwarded the case to ICE Homeland Security investigations. What followed was Operation Northern Veil, 18 months of surveillance, wiretaps on 11 phone lines, financial subpoenas for 43 bank accounts across 8 countries, undercover purchases, coordinated intelligence sharing with Interpol, UK Border Force, and Somali federal authorities. By January 2025, federal agents had built a case they believed untouchable. The Nur brothers weren't just facilitating asylum claims. They were running a transnational network that stretched from Mogadishu to Minneapolis, trafficking people and narcotics under the cover of legal immigration services. Comment exposed if you believe this couldn't happen without political protection. The battering ram struck the reinforced front door at 3:47 a.m. It took 3 strikes to breach. Agents flooded inside. Hassan Nur was in the master bedroom, hands raised, eyes cold. He said nothing. Abdurrahman was in a separate wing. He attempted to reach for a desk drawer. Agents tackled him. Inside the drawer, a loaded Glock 19 and a burner phone still displaying an encrypted message. The first floor revealed the surface operation, a home office with filing cabinets containing over 2,000 client immigration files, laptops, printers, legal pads covered in notes, nothing unusual for immigration attorneys. But in the kitchen pantry behind false shelving, agents found the first cache. Vacuum-sealed bundles of cash, $840,000 in 20s, 50s, and hundreds, stacked neatly, organized by denomination. In the master bedroom closet behind a false wall panel, agents discovered assault rifles, 23 firearms total, AK-47s, AR-15s, handguns, body armor, ammunition cases stacked floor to ceiling. In the basement rec room beneath a pool table, agents found a floor safe. It took 30 minutes to crack. Inside, 47 kilograms of cocaine, 18 kilograms of heroin, 340,000 fentanyl pills pressed to look like prescription Percocet. Simultaneously, 4 other locations were breached. A warehouse in northeast Minneapolis yielded shipping containers with hidden compartments. A luxury apartment in downtown's Mill District contained encrypted laptops and surveillance equipment monitoring the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. A transit house in St. Paul held 12 individuals locked in basement rooms. No windows, mattresses on concrete floors. Agents found restraints, confiscated passports, debt ledgers listing amounts owed in the tens of thousands. If this shocks you, imagine what's still hidden. Hit like to push this story further. But the real discovery came in the basement. Behind a soundproof door disguised as a utility panel, agents found stairs descending 20 feet underground. The door required a biometric fingerprint scanner. It took a bypass device attached to the control panel to override the lock. What they found below defied expectation. A tunnel 8 feet high, 10 feet wide, climate-controlled, LED lighting running the full length, industrial ventilation systems, reinforced concrete walls with steel rebar, independent power supply with battery backup systems. The tunnel stretched 340 feet. It terminated at a warehouse property 3 blocks away, a building the Nur brothers owned through a shell company registered in Delaware. Inside the tunnel, agents found warehouse-level organization, pallets stacked with narcotics inventoried like state property, cocaine bricks labeled with coded destinations, heroin packaged in heat-sealed bags marked with distribution dates, methamphetamine in industrial quantities, over 1,100 kilograms total. But the narcotics weren't the worst discovery. Deeper in the tunnel, agents found living quarters, 12 beds, minimal bedding, a single bathroom, food supplies stored in plastic bins. This wasn't storage. People had lived here recently. On a folding table, agents found documents, handwritten ledgers listing names, ages, and amounts owed, payment schedules, shipment logs with coded destinations, MSBATL 12 units, MSBC 8 units, MSBCI 15 units. Status entries beside each name, active, transferred, disposed. One document changed everything. A spiral-bound notebook titled Project Mogadishu Pipeline. Inside, logistics blueprints for trafficking routes from East Africa through Turkey, London, and Canada into Minneapolis. Contingency protocols for leadership arrests. Expansion plans for additional facilities in Atlanta and Columbus, Ohio. A list of compromised officials with monthly payment schedules. One handwritten line, by 2027 the system will be self-sustaining. Current capacity, 380. Expansion target, 600. Type justice. If you believe every official who enabled this should be prosecuted. The encrypted laptops revealed the network's depth. Email chains, payment records, scanned documents showing wire transfers to officials. 2 Minneapolis Police Narcotics Task Force officers were named. Monthly payments, $18,000 each. Their role, provide advance warning of federal investigations and state patrol sweeps. 1 Minnesota State Patrol trooper. Monthly payment, $12,000. Role, facilitate interstate transport without inspection stops. A CBP inspector at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Monthly payment, $22,000. Role, clear arriving individuals flagged for secondary screening. A legislative aide to a Minnesota state senator. Monthly payment, $9,500. Role, provide intelligence on pending immigration enforcement legislation and policy changes. The evidence included screenshots of encrypted messages. One from a narcotics officer dated December 2024. Federal sweep planned Friday morning, Cedar Riverside area. Advise relocation. Translation: move the drugs before the raid. Another from the CBP inspector dated November 2024. Manifest review flagged Flight 237 from Istanbul. Recommend alternate routing. Translation: avoid detection. A federal investigator later told reporters, "This wasn't corruption. This was a purchase system. They didn't just operate in Minneapolis. They owned access." The network didn't stop with officials. Lawyers who structured shell companies to hide property ownership, bankers who processed suspicious transfers without filing required reports, accountants who falsified tax documents, port officials in Newark who cleared shipping containers without inspection, real estate agents who facilitated cash purchases of properties used as transit houses. Without people like them, networks like this cannot function at scale. Comment accountability if you're still paying attention. These names need to be public. But the Nur brothers weren't operating alone. The network stretched far beyond Minneapolis. Investigators traced connections to 7 American cities: Houston, Atlanta, Seattle, Columbus, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Portland. Each city had a local coordinator. Each coordinator reported to the Nur brothers. Each location operated similarly. Legal immigration practices as fronts, underground facilities for trafficking operations, corrupted officials providing protection. The international scope was staggering. The operation originated in Mogadishu, where recruiters promised asylum and jobs in America. Victims paid between $15,000 and $40,000 for passage. They were flown to Istanbul, then London, then Toronto. From Canada, they were driven across the border into Minnesota through remote crossings in the northern woods. Once in Minneapolis, victims discovered the truth. The promised jobs didn't exist. The asylum applications were fake. Their passports were confiscated. They were told they owed additional fees: housing, food, transportation. The debt ballooned. They were forced to work in warehouses, construction sites, and private homes for no pay. Some were coerced into drug distribution. Refusal meant violence. Financial records showed the scale: $2.3 billion in transaction values tracked over 6 years. Narcotics distribution generating an estimated $180 million annually. Human trafficking operations moving between 400 and 600 individuals per year along established routes. The human cost couldn't be quantified. Federal agents interviewed victims who hadn't seen sunlight in over a year, individuals who bore scars from beatings, people who'd watched others disappear after attempting escape. Share this video. They count on you staying silent, but your engagement makes these networks impossible to ignore. By dawn, 100 individuals were in federal custody. Hassan and Abdurrahman Nur, 18 co-conspirators across 7 states, 12 corrupted officials, 53 facilitators including lawyers, accountants, and bankers. Total seizures: 2.64 tons of narcotics, $47.2 million in cash, $83 million in property including the Kenwood mansion, the warehouse, 4 luxury vehicles, and 12 rental properties used as transit houses. Cryptocurrency wallets containing an additional $31 million. 89 victims were rescued from locations across Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Bloomington. Medical evaluations revealed malnutrition, untreated injuries, and trauma consistent with prolonged captivity. Federal authorities offered T visas, asylum pathways, and witness protection. One victim, a 24-year-old man named only as AM in court documents, told investigators he'd been locked in the tunnel for 9 months. He'd arrived believing he had a construction job waiting. Instead, he was forced to package narcotics and threatened with deportation if he refused. Federal prosecutors filed charges under RICO statutes, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and narco-terrorism provisions. The evidence was exhaustive. The paper trail was unbroken. Defense arguments collapsed under timestamps, financial records, and victim testimony. Hassan Nur faces life imprisonment. Abdurrahman Nur faces 40 years. No plea agreements, no political compromise. This is not an outlier. This is a warning. According to United Nations estimates, 40 million people worldwide are trapped in conditions of modern slavery. Trafficking networks generate $150 billion annually. They operate in every country, in wealthy neighborhoods and poor ones, behind walls that look legitimate. What happened in Minneapolis is happening everywhere. These networks survive because people look away, because officials accept bribes, because systems designed to protect are compromised by those who value profit over human life. Additional investigations are expanding. Federal task forces have identified similar networks in Columbus, Atlanta, and Portland. The networks are adaptive. They change methods. They change routes. They change cover stories. The fight continues. Hit like so this story escapes the algorithm that buries uncomfortable truths. Comment your thoughts below. Say what you really think about corruption that enables modern slavery. Share this with someone who thinks trafficking only happens overseas. They need to see how it operates in American cities under the cover of legitimate businesses. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Justice requires witnesses. Accountability demands attention. Every voice makes these networks harder to hide. This is not the end of the story.